Hallo und herzlich willkommen. Today I'm going to talk to you all about the GCSE German speaking exam, and I'm going to tell you how to get a grade 9 in the speaking. So there's quite a bit of crossover from what I'm going to say for the French and German speaking exams, but the focus is on German. So we're going to look a bit at the mark scheme, what exactly you need to do with your answers to get a grade 9, and then we're going to look at some actual examples of what to do and what not to do in the speaking exam. Let's get into it. Let's start with the first part of the speaking exam, the role play. In fact, before you even get into the role play, you've got your 12 minutes preparation time. So you've got 12 minutes to prepare the role play and the photocard. The role play answers, they need to be short and simple, so you could spend 6 minutes doing the role play, 6 minutes doing the photocard, but your sentences for the photocard are going to need to be a little bit more complex, so spend a few more minutes on the photocard. Set out your answers clearly, write them out in bullet point form on separate lines, and this mirrors the format of the roleplay card, which we're going to look at in a second. Keep the answers short and simple as you can. As you've mentioned, you don't get credit for complex answers, but you might lose marks for your knowledge of language if you make mistakes by trying to extend. Once you've answered the question, the examiner stops marking, so you really have no benefit for trying to extend your answers in this part of the test. So let's have a look at this example role play. So you're given this when you walk into the preparation room. There's 5 bullet points that you've got to consider. You're going to answer 3 questions that you've prepared. Where there's the exclamation mark, you get a surprise question, or perhaps 2 surprise questions. And then where you see the question mark, you need to ask the examiner a question. So looking at the roleplay mark scheme briefly, as you can see, the roleplay is worth 15 marks out of a total of 60 for the speaking paper. And you've got 5 bullet points on your roleplay card that you're given, as we saw on the previous slide, and each bullet point is marked out of 2. So the focus is really on communication. Are you conveying the message clearly and understandably to the examiner, yes or no? And you are marked as well overall out of 5 for your knowledge and use of language, but it's just talking about very good knowledge and use of language, so it's not making any reference to complexity. So just keep it short and simple, because you're not going to get any credit for extending, but you might lose marks if you try and extend and then you make some grammatical mistakes. As you can see, I'm laying my notes out in bullet point form. Also, when there's a surprise question, I'm putting a bullet point there. When the examiner is speaking to me, even if I'm not sure what they're asking or it doesn't quite match what I'm expecting them to say, I am just reading off my notes and I know exactly what to say when. And I'm keeping them as short and simple as I can.
Du sprichst mit deinem deutschen Austauschpartner, deiner deutschen Austauschpartnerin. Ich bin dein Austauschpartner, deine Austauschpartnerin. Wie ist es mit Fremdsprachen an deiner Schule?
Ich lerne Deutsch, Spanisch und Italienisch. Ich lerne gern Fremdsprachen, weil es wichtig ist, mit anderen Leuten zu kommunizieren.
Wie ist es mit Fremdsprachen an deiner Schule?
Wir lernen Deutsch.
Seit wann lernst du Deutsch in der Schule?
Seit 3 Jahren.
Wie oft lernst du Deutsch in der Schule? Und wie findest du deine Deutschstunden?
Ich lerne Deutsch 2-mal pro Woche. Meine Deutschstunden sind toll.
Möchtest du in der Zukunft nach Deutschland fahren? Warum nicht?
Ja, weil ich die Sprache mag. Warum lernst du Fremdsprachen?
Weil sie wichtig sind.
So we've just seen an example of a role play in context. Let's just analyse that a little bit. What you can see on your screen right now is the examiner script. You're not going to see that in the exam. So the first question, wie ist es mit Fremdsprachen an deiner Schule? And you might get into the exam and think, wie ist es mit? What on earth does that mean? But actually this is quite a common question type in the role play. It just means what about. So what about foreign languages at your school? And this is where setting out your notes in bullet point form is really helpful, because even if you don't understand what the examiner is asking you, you know that you just need to, that's the first question, so you know that you need to read out that first bullet point that you've written down. Wir lernen Deutsch, so just 3-word answer, short, simple, job done. Question 2. Seit wann lernst du Deutsch in der Schule? So, since when have you been learning German at school? And seit 3 Jahren. So, Germans, they use the present tense with for and since. So, again, it's a very short and simple answer. Doesn't even have to be a full sentence. Then, next up is your surprise question, and that's where it's really important that you've set out your notes in bullet point form and you've either left a gap or you've written surprise question so that you know the surprise question is coming and you're having to think on the spot, so that you don't just carry on reading from your notes, because then you're going to get mixed up and you're going to be answering a question that hasn't been asked yet. So make sure you've set out your notes in bullet point form, as I showed you previously on the video. Watch out, because there are some surprise questions where you actually get 2 surprise questions. Most of them are only 1, but occasionally you will get 2, and you need to answer both of them to get 2 marks. It's fine to ask the examiner to repeat, just something like wie bitte will get the examiner to repeat the question if you need, and that's absolutely fine. You're not penalised for that. Möchtest du in der Zukunft nach Deutschland fahren? Warum nicht? So there, okay, you do need to say why, so that's going to be a slightly longer answer, but still pretty short. And then when you get to the question at the end, it might sound obvious, but ask a question that fits the context of the role play. So you're speaking to an exchange partner. What question would you ask an exchange partner, someone who's in Germany? Why are they learning foreign languages? What foreign languages do they learn? Something that you might genuinely ask in that context. So that was my answer for möchtest du in der Zukunft nach Deutschland fahren? Ja, weil ich die Sprache mag. Yes, because I like the language. And then my question, warum lernst du Fremdsprachen? Why do you learn foreign languages? Okay, roleplay done. Now let's look at part 2, which is the photocard. So, just going back to the preparation time, first of all. When you're preparing, you need at least 3 to 4 clauses per question for 3 of the questions. So you've got 3 prepared questions, and then you're going to get 2 surprise questions. You need to give and explain an opinion as well. And replies to all of the questions need to be clear. So not just the 3 prepared questions, but also the 2 unprepared questions need to be answered clearly. But for those 2, if you've extended your first 3, your prepared questions, then you just need to give an understandable answer to the 2 unprepared one. Doesn't have to be as long for those ones, as long as you've extended those first 3. So you're kind of taking the pressure off by doing 3 to 4 clauses for those 3 prepared questions. You might feel really confident with the 2 unprepared ones and give 3 to 4 clauses to those as well, but you don't need to. The first question is always what is in the photo, so your answer must be related to the photo, although you can use conjecture, like I suppose that. One question will ask for your opinion. You also need to explain it, so using, for example, weil, because you have to, so not only giving your opinion but explaining it as well. So again, because you can write out your 3 to 4 clauses for the prepared questions, you're just reading off the notes. So make sure you're preparing your answers exactly as the mark scheme is requiring you to, because then you're just reading it out and it's easy marks then. So as we've just mentioned, this is the mark scheme. So to get into that top band, you're replying to all 5 questions clearly, developing most answers, so most means 3 out of the 5 questions, and developing means giving at least 3 clauses. So 3 to 4 clauses for your 3 prepared questions, and that will be safe then, and giving and explaining an opinion. So here's an example photocard. So that's what you're going to get when you walk into the preparation room. Yours won't be in colour though. But was gibt es auf dem Foto? The first question for every photocard. What is there on the photo? Wo kann man am besten die Ferien verbringen? So where can you spend the holidays best of all? So that's naturally going to lead you to give an opinion. And was hast du letztes Jahr in den Sommerferien gemacht? What did you do last year in the summer holidays? So we've talked a lot about 3 to 4 clauses. What do we mean by that exactly? Well, es gibt einen Strand. There is a beach, so that's one clause. Es gibt einen Strand und die Sonne scheint. So there's a beach and the sun is shining, that's 2 clauses. So clauses are often separated by a connective like and, but, because, although, and so on. Es gibt einen Strand, wo viele Leute in der Sonne liegen und sich entspannen. And that's 3 clauses. So there is a beach where lots of people are lying in the sun and relaxing. So using a relative clause like who, which, where, that also signifies another clause. As you can see, when I'm writing out my answers to the photocard, I'm also doing that in bullet point form, making sure to write 3 to 4 clauses for each of the prepared questions. If I do that, that just takes the pressure off the surprise questions, making sure I've got an opinion in there and explained it.
Was gibt es auf dem Foto?
In der Foto.
Was gibt es auf dem Foto?
Es gibt einen Strand.
Wo kann man am besten die Ferien verbringen?
Am besten am Strand.
So, don't make these common mistakes in the photocard. Auf dem Foto gibt es. That is going to be your sentence starter for that first question every single time. You've got that in the prompt. Don't change it. You know that's grammatically correct, so just be safe, stick with that. And that's also for the other 2 prepared questions. Use the words in those prompts to help you formulate your response. Make sure you've got at least 3 clauses, so 3 to 4 clauses is going to be safe. Do that for all 3 of your prepared questions. Can't emphasize that enough. And here is a formula that you can use for that first question, because it's always the same. What is there in the photo? So you could say, auf dem Foto gibt es 4 Leute, die Computer spielen, was lustig ist. So in the photo there are 4 people who are playing the computer, which is fun or funny. So you can use that formula all the time for that first question. So how many people are in the photo, what they're doing, and what your opinion about it is. So as you can see from my response, auf dem Foto gibt es 4 Leute, for example. In the photo there are 4 people, die Computer spielen, who are playing computer, was, which, lustig. So you can insert whatever adjective there, and then which is going to send the verb, in this case ist, to the end of the sentence. And you can use that formula every single time and make sure you get 3 clauses into that first question. And then explain your opinion. As you can see with the second question, there is a question in there which is going to lead you to give your opinion. Make sure you're explaining it as well by using weil for because.
Was gibt es auf dem Foto?
Auf dem Foto gibt es einen Strand, wo viele Leute in der Sonne liegen und sich entspannen.
Wo kann man am besten die Ferien verbringen?
Am besten verbringt man die Ferien am Strand, weil es viel zu tun gibt, damit du dich nicht langweilst.
Was hast du letztes Jahr in den Sommerferien gemacht?
Letztes Jahr habe ich einen Strandurlaub in Italien gemacht, was unglaublich toll war, weil das Wetter immer warm war.
Warum ist Urlaub so wichtig?
Urlaub ist wichtig, weil man sich regelmäßig entspannen sollte.
Was sind deine Pläne für diesen Sommer?
Diesen Sommer werde ich in die Türkei fahren, weil die Strände besonders schön sind.
So here's the examiner script, and of course you're not going to see this in the exam because it's got the 2 unprepared questions printed on them. But let's just analyze these answers that I showed you on the previous part. So was gibt es auf dem Foto? Auf dem Foto gibt es einen Strand, wo viele Leute in der Sonne liegen und sich entspannen. So 3 clauses. In the photo there's a beach where lots of people are lying in the sun and relaxing. Wo kann man am besten die Ferien verbringen? Where can you spend the holidays best of all? Am besten verbringt man die Ferien am Strand, 1 clause, weil es viel zu tun gibt, because there's a lot to do, 2 clauses, damit du dich nicht langweilst, 3rd clause, so that you don't get bored. Was hast du letztes Jahr in den Sommerferien gemacht? What did you do last year in the summer holidays? Letztes Jahr habe ich einen Strandurlaub in Italien gemacht. 1 clause, last year I did a beach holiday in Italy, was unglaublich toll war, which was unbelievably great, 2 clauses, weil das Wetter immer warm war, because the weather was always warm, 3rd clause. So I've given 3 clauses for those first 3 questions. I've given an opinion and I've explained it using weil. So I've fulfilled the mark scheme. Now all I need to do is just answer the last 2 questions clearly, and I'm in that top band comfortably. So warum ist Urlaub so wichtig? Why is holiday so important? Urlaub ist wichtig, weil man sich regelmäßig entspannen sollte. So holiday is important because one should regularly relax. So there's only 2 clauses in that. It's not as extended. I could extend it more if I wanted, but I don't need to. I've already done that enough for the first 3. Was sind deine Pläne für diesen Sommer? What are your plans for this summer? So you can see that's kind of asking me a future tense question. One thing to know is that if you get a past tense question in your prepared questions, like you can see my third one is, then you're going to get a future tense question in the unprepared questions and vice versa. So diesen Sommer werde ich in die Türkei fahren, weil die Strände besonders schön sind. So this summer I will travel to Turkey because the beaches are particularly or especially beautiful. So again, only 2 clauses. I've answered it clearly. No need to extend it any more than that. Job done. Now, let's look at the final part of the speaking exam, the general conversation. So, for the general conversation, before you start this part, you've done your role play, you've done your photocard. Now you need to hand over the notes that you made in the preparation time to your teacher who's conducting the test. So you've got no notes anymore when you do the general conversation. Just you and the teacher examiner. But of course, you should have been preparing your answers and memorizing answers to typical questions in the lead up to the speaking exam. Now it's the time to extend, use all the structures, all the vocabulary, all the grammar that you've been learning over the last few years. Basically, you want to show off your knowledge of German. And this part is worth half of the entire speaking paper. So this is the part you really want to get right. So quick look at the mark scheme for the general conversation. So you've got a mark out of 10 for your communication. So extended sequences of speech, as we've said. You need to give and explain opinions. So using weil and obwohl, because and although. Then a mark out of 10 for range and accuracy of language. You want a wide variety of language, so vocabulary, grammatical structures. You need 3 tenses or 3 time frames, so past, present, future. Complex structures, so using things like weil for because, then for when or if. I've got another video where you can see a whole list of the complex structures that you can use in the speaking exam. Just click on the link. Then you've also got a mark out of 5 for your pronunciation and intonation. So that doesn't mean you need to sound like a native speaker. That's not the expectation. But there are some key sounds in German which an English speaker or a speaker of any other language should be able to pronounce, or at least have a good go at pronouncing. Things like weil, so the W sounding like a V, the EI sounding like an I, weil. Viel, so the V sounding like a F, and the IE sounding like an E, so viel. The CH in Woche, so it's a H sound. S, depending on the word it's coming in, if it's followed by a vowel, so, or if it's followed by a consonant, Sport. And paying attention to the umlaut, schon, already, schön, beautiful, schon, schön. Werden, will, würden, would. So a few key sounds, really try and focus on getting those right, because that's going to help you to get 5 for your pronunciation and intonation. And then finally, a mark out of 5 for spontaneity and fluency. So yes, you are planning your answers, you're practicing, you're memorizing them, but you're trying not to sound rehearsed, you're still trying to sound natural. And you do want to extend, but that doesn't mean you're speaking for 2.5 minutes just on that one question, on the first question that the examiners ask you. You do want to, it is a conversation, it's not a speech. So you want to leave room for the examiner to ask you questions. So if you've answered a question and you've said something interesting, the teacher examiner will then ask you a follow-up question based on what you've just said. And that's where you can demonstrate your spontaneity. And you don't have to extend that as much as your other answers, but the purpose of that is just to show you that you can think on the spot and that you can answer naturally and spontaneously and not just sit there hesitating, wondering what to say. But it is only out of 5, the spontaneity and fluency, so not as much as the mark for communication and for range of language. So words such as natürlich, of course, auf jeden Fall, definitely, and also different filler words like na ja, tja, they'll give you some thinking time, and it'll also help you sound more fluent and a lot more natural in your conversation. So what theme should you choose? Well, of course, that's a personal choice, completely up to you what you're going to choose. But it's probably best to choose the theme that's the most difficult, in inverted commas. Difficult because it just depends on the person. Whatever you find most difficult might not be the same as what somebody else finds most difficult. On balance, you might say theme 2 is the most challenging because it includes social and global issues, which might be a bit more difficult to talk about. You might not have enough to say about those issues. You might need a bit more thinking time to come up with a response for that. So if you've planned out those answers, then you'll probably have more to say, and then your surprise theme should hopefully be on an easier topic where you'll be able to think a bit more on the spot when you get a spontaneous question. But having said that, you do really want to plan out your answers to all 3 themes. You're probably just going to do your chosen theme in a bit more detail. And just to note, the photo card I showed you earlier on in the video was a theme 2 card, so we're going to look at some general conversation answers for theme 2, but just be aware that if you chose theme 2 in your general conversation, you would have got a different photo card to the one that I showed you earlier on in the video. So for theme 2, these are some possible questions that you might get. There, you can find them on the AQA website as a past paper. You're not going to get exactly these questions. You're not going to know exactly what questions you're going to get, but there's only a limited amount of questions that you might face in the exam. If you're talking about holidays, how many different questions can you get asked about holidays? Where have you been in the past? Where would you like to go in the future? What do you do normally? There's a limited scope for what you can be asked. So preparing answers to common questions will kind of give you a good idea of what you might face in the exam, but of course you're not going to know exactly what those questions are in advance. So let's have a look at some example answers in a bit more detail.
Was gibt es für Jugendliche in deiner Stadt?
In meiner Stadt, die London heißt, gibt es unglaublich viel zu tun, deswegen langweilt man sich nie. Zum Beispiel, man kann viel Sport im Sportzentrum treiben, und abends kann man mit Freunden ausgehen. Leider ist meine Stadt ziemlich schmutzig, was ich schrecklich finde.
Also was machst du für die Umwelt?
Ich trenne immer den Müll, weil ich glaube, dass der Müll das größte Problem in unserer Stadt ist. Ich trenne nicht nur den Müll, sondern recycle ich auch die Druckerpatronen. Nächste Woche werde ich sogar eine Fahrradwoche in der Schule organisieren, damit wir die Luftverschmutzung reduzieren können. Es gibt viel zu tun. Naja, wie meine Eltern sagen, das Leben ist kein Ponyhof. Ohne dass ich mich für die Umwelt einsetze, wird sich nichts ändern.
Und was macht deine Familie für die Umwelt?
Meine Mutter zum Beispiel benutzt immer öffentliche Verkehrsmittel, wohingegen mein Vater immer mit dem Auto zur Arbeit fährt, was ich enttäuschend finde, da es schon zu viel Luftverschmutzung gibt.
Was machst du in den Winterferien?
Ich bevorzuge aktive Urlaube, weil ich mich schnell langweile. Deshalb fahre ich normalerweise in die Berge, weil ich dort Skifahren kann, obwohl das manchmal gefährlich ist. Meine Freundin sagt immer, pass auf, Skifahren ist gefährlich. Letztes Jahr hatte sie ihr Bein beim Skifahren verletzt. Sie muss immer ihren Senf dazu geben. Ich finde Skifahren immer unterhaltsam. Machen Sie in den Winterferien?
Ich fahre auch sehr gern Ski. Und wohin bist du in den letzten Winterferien gefahren?
In den letzten Winterferien bin ich nach Kanada gefahren, um Ski zu fahren. Skifahren in Kanada ist viel besser als in Europa, weil es aufregender ist. Der Urlaub hat mir sehr gefallen, weil es sowohl unterhaltsam als auch aufregend war. Es war das beste Erlebnis meines Lebens. Wenn ich reich wäre, würde ich jeden Winter Ski fahren.
Was machst du, um gesund zu bleiben?
Gute Frage, eigentlich sehr viel. Ein gesunder Lebensstil ist total wichtig, und dafür braucht man Bewegung an der frischen Luft. Mein Vorbild ist eine Tennisspielerin, deswegen treibe ich 3-mal pro Woche Sport. Gesunde Ernährung gehört auch zu einem gesunden Lebensstil zu. Als ich klein war, konnte ich Bonbons kaum widerstehen, aber jetzt versuche ich 5 Portionen Obst und Gemüse pro Tag zu.
So we've just looked at an example of a general conversation theme in the speaking exam, and we've seen and heard examples of answers that you want to be aiming for when you're doing your general conversation. But here's just a summary of what not to do in the speaking exam. Giving only brief answers. No, you want to extend your answers as much as possible. Using short and simple structures. Again, no, you want to be giving as many complex structures as you can. Forgetting to ask a question. So the person who's conducting your exam will remind you at the end of the general conversation to ask them a question if you haven't already. But it's better to just, when you're planning your answers, plan a question in and just ask it as soon as you can to make sure you've got it in there. Sounding rehearsed and robotic. Again, not what you want to be like. Of course, you're going to be planning out your answers, memorizing your answers, but there's still a difference between sounding rehearsed when you're reading it out and actually sounding natural when you're having the conversation. And start talking about something completely unrelated to the theme. Yes, you want to be extending, narrating events, but it still has to be related to that theme. Otherwise, you're not going to get credit for it. So, final few pointers. Prepare a question related to your chosen theme. You will get penalised a mark if you don't ask a question, so prepare it, ask it as soon as you can. Some answers may be briefer, yes, that's fine. You might not know what to say. If an examiner asks you a question you're not 100% prepared for, that's fine. Some answers will be briefer, but overall, you want to extend as much as possible. You do have to speak for 2.5 to 3.5 minutes, no getting away from that. So that's for each theme. So one thing, your chosen theme is going to be 2.5 to 3.5 minutes, and your surprise theme 2.5 to 3.5 minutes. So the shorter your answers are, the more questions you'll have to answer. So you might as well just extend as much as possible. Leave room for the examiner to ask you follow-up questions. Yes, you're preparing questions, preparing your answers to questions, memorizing it. But as you're doing that, if you can predict what follow-up questions the examiner might ask you, that will help. Now, the follow-up questions might be answered more briefly, which is totally fine. The purpose of those follow-up questions is showing spontaneity, which is worth 5 marks on the mark scheme, and also the ability to think and answer on the spot. By predicting what these follow-up questions can be, there's more chance that you can keep up your fluency and that you're not going to be sitting there hesitating, wondering what to say. So, hope that video was useful. Any questions, let me know in the comments. And good luck for your speaking exam.